It's my great pleasure and honor to be invited here. And I come from New York, and I was told that New York is not America, so, so I'm happy to come here, the real America. So the title of our topic here, special thanks to Sarah's kind invitation and kind arrangement. So the title of my topic here today is about the Chinese new documentary movement. So I wish to explain two key words about what's the new means, the new documentary movement, and another word is the movement, why we named it as the movement. So so I wish to interpret it in the new documentary movement from these 4 point: the historic background, the theoretical preparation, the concept of the reality, and the individualized point of view to explain the movement. If we wish to back to the new, which means different from the tradition, actually in China, China entered in the television period from the beginning of the 80s. From that time, the television settings had come to the ordinary people's families. So from that time, we began to have the different the television genres. But compared to the tradition, we have the central documentary film studios to produce such kind of news clips and the so-called the news about the motherland, such kind of things. Such kind of films, documentary films, were also screened before the former feature films. In my childhood, we always, every week, we'll come to watch the films in the open area, these open fields, in the university or in the countryside. Everywhere, we have all kinds of different the fields to screen films. But before that screening, we also have such kind of documentary films. So after China entered into the television period, we have 2 different important departments in television station. One called the news department. Another called is the special topic department. The news department produced the news, the short news, which broadcast in the CCTV. CCTV is the central the China Central Television Station is the most important television station in China, which covered the market of over 40%. 50% market in China today. It has the very important news programs called the News Top Line, 新闻联播 News Top Line, which will be broadcasting all over China in CCTV or in all kinds of local television stations at the same time, simultaneously. So this kind of news comes from the old traditional news documentaries. And another kind of department is called the special topic programs, which is long programs. So we call this kind of genre the special topic programs. So actually, it's a kind of propaganda ways. But at the middle of the 80s, this kind of special topic programs developed rapidly. A lot of different intellectuals, including some so-called public intellectuals, entered such kind of programs to produce a lot of influential television programs. But after that time, the very crucial point of time is the end of the 80s. End of the 80s means a very crucial transformation for China as the Tiananmen accident happened. Before that, all Chinese think the Western, especially America, is our resource of the utopians. We think we just get rid of the traditional planning, economic society. We come to the market oriented societies. So we wish to we have some imagined society from the Western. So at that time, all the societies had such kind of passion to image the other side of the utopians. But after that, after the accident which happened at the end of the 80s, a lot of Chinese people, including some television workers, they find we need to rethink about what China means. The China is not what we think before. We thought we should rethink of that. We reevaluated about what China means. So at that time, the first generation of the new documentary movement directors, their workers carried this period. They began to produce their documentaries and carry this period and finished at the beginning of the 90s. So at that time, the wish to understand Chinese society from the bottom up, and not from the up to bottom, because the traditional way we think is the spatial topic program I just mentioned. It's used the traditional way. It's called the grand narrative, with the voice, the God voice, and we interpretation a lot of explanation about what it means. So separate from the explanation from the image, that kind of ways. So we think that's not true. So we need to find another kind of truth, another kind of relatives. So such kind of pursuit behind this new documentary movement. But at that time, we had not enough theoretical protections. But we borrowed the series from the film series. The film series at that time is the long short series of Bazin, the French theorist. His series has introduced to China at the beginning of the 80s. It served as the so-called fourth generation of China's filmmaker, because fourth generations at that time they wish to develop a course called new realistic ways to tell the stories of the ordinary people. But just because they share the realistic connected with in the old tradition we call the socialist realistic. So we share the realistic, let the Bazin series and the fourth generation get the legitimacy position in China at that time. But after the fourth generation is so-called the fifth generations. When the fifth generations emerged, in the series of the film studies, they began to criticize the Bazin series, which means the so-called fifth generation's achievement don't need the realism to explain their achievement. So it's quite interesting. But after that, when the Bazin series has been criticized in the film studies, it be appreciated in the television field. So it's quite interesting why I called the new documentary movement from the television documentary movement, just because the film institution in China at that time is quite official. It's strictly censorship to get permission, and cost a lot. And another is cost a lot. It's not ordinary people can get to get it. So, but for the television stations, the workers who feel sensitive about the society's changes, especially at the beginning of the 80s, they feel sensitive about that, and they contact with the society directly. So at that time, the first generation, even so-called independent documentary filmmakers, has a lot of different ways, the public and the private ways, connect with television station because they need the camera, they need the television equipment to produce their workers. So this is why we find a very interesting overlap between the so-called independent and the systems. So in my research, I emphasize the important institution production of television, the important, because we studied the media, mass media. We know how important the mass media to influence the societies. So in the 90s, especially in the beginning of the 90s, is the golden age of Chinese television development. At that time, we have all of us call this golden time. Compare with today, because we have the market-oriented reform, so and distinct a lot of space for the documentary production. At that time, independent documentary filmmakers, cooperation with the television station, and they made a lot of workers at that time. So it's quite interesting. So just the area, overlapped areas, more productive than just the systems or the independent at the first time. I can back to my personal stories to explain that. Actually, my academic background is a literature series. I get my Ph.D. degrees in 1993, and my dissertant focused on Western aesthetics at that time, and at that time I feel interested about the drama series. Just because at that time we used the Western concept of the tragedy comedy's concept to explain the Chinese traditional drama. I feel confused about that. I wish to know what's the means of the tragedy in Western context. My goals is focused on the Aristotle's poetics at that time. So. My major studies focus on why the mimelism in Aristotle, different from the Plato, different in Plato's concept, mimelism means the truth connected with the divine spirit. The truth, divine, the spirit define the truth, definition, make the definition of the truth at that time. But after the poetics of the Aristotle, his poetries focus on another concept. Similar with the it's like the how to say bilinguistic 生物学怎么说biologist, yeah, it's biologist concept of the mimelism. Okay, sorry. So it's in Aristotle's concept, the form reason. He has 4 reasons to explain the mimicisms. And one is important is the form reasons. Form reason means the so-called the form and the context, just like the seed. Just like they have the impulse from inside. So this kind of the transformation and developed to the classic time of the, for example, in French, so-called the classic time is so-called the 3 unities. Just from the form concept to explain what the tragedy means. So my interesting about why at the ancient time, the so-called tragedy story often happened in the ancient divine families, loyalty families, the divine clan families. All this kind of stories all happened in such kind of families. Aristotle explained that just happened in that. So, but in my opinion, I find this it's the different times in the old times. The fate of the society, of the community, all bared by such kind of divine families. So the divine family at that time means represented the whole fate of the people, of the community, of the cities. But after that, today, it's individualized societies. So we need to redefine what the tragedy means. So today we need to know why tragedy happened in ordinary people. Because today, just ordinary people, not the divine, the loyalty family, bear the heaviest breast of the societies, bear the suffer of the society's transformation. So such kind of tragic stories should be explained in such kind of transformation. So this is why I began to focus my interest from the old traditional Greek stories, Greek tragedies, to today's ordinary people's tragedy stories. After I graduated in 1993, I find a job in the journalism school of Fudan University and failed to find a job in the literature department. At that time, we just built the broadcasting department soon, and they need a new faculty to teach a course called the writing for the special topic programs. So they said, you come from the literature department, so this course should be suitable for you. So you need to teach this course. So I wish to, so it's a new challenge for me. So I need to come to the television station to know what's that mean. That's in 1993. It's very, in my liking, it's a very crucial point for the television documentary get legitimacy in the systems. So at that time, 2 important television programs broadcasting. One is in CCTV. It's called the space time. It's called the life space. It's called the life space. They have a slogan called "Tell the ordinary people's own stories." This slogan is quite popular. After it's issued, it's become quite popular at that time. And another programs in Shanghai television station is called issued by it's called the documentary editing rooms. It's also at that time. It's also at that year. So I entered television station to know what's the special programs means. But at that time, I find all the television the producers. They discuss about the special topic programs. They talk warmly about the documentaries. But what the documentary means? They told me the stories. The documentary is the abandoned the words at the television period, because we think these are old propaganda ways, because this is the film documentary ways. So when we entered in the television time, we don't use that word. We use the special topic programs as the new genre's name. But we feel we don't like that one. We don't like special topics. We need a new name. So they find that we refined the documentary. We use the documentary. So they pick up the documentary again to rename the new program. So at that time, they began to call themselves the television documentary. So we can find that this word has been redefined at that time. So it's quite rediscovered at that time. So for me, it's touched my nerves of academics. I find these stories all about ordinary peoples. And at that year, there's a quite famous stories broadcasting by the Shanghai television station, which calls the Mao suitcase. Mao in Chinese name means a little baby. A little baby suitcase. What's the story tells? Immigrant women workers come from the inside province, Hunan province, come to Shanghai to find a job. And at that time, he lived together with a Shanghai guy who is a disabled guy. Disabled guy, yeah. But when this girl has a baby, the guy said, "This is not my son. This is not my baby." So he drives him home. This girl back his province, her hometown, and both the baby, and then back to Shanghai to apply for justice. Actually, to apply for justice, but that guy refused to recognize this baby. It's his. So this girl lived in a very little hotel and have no money, and face very great difficulty. So at that time, some audience tell the television station, Shanghai television stations, to tell the story. So maybe you can concern about this girl. So he has mirror of life. At that time, that year it's also very crucial year for China. It's the reopen time. After the accident of Tiananmen Square, it's reopen time. So from that time, Shanghai has a slogan: is the 1 year we have big changes. Every year we have big changes because a lot of peasant immigration has rushed into Shanghai. So this is the social background of these stories. So the producer come to this hotel to find these girls, and they help these girls, go to the count, to the hospital to do the blood test, to see if the fathers or not. So this story is quite influential in Shanghai. After this broadcasting, all of the Chinese citizens talking about they just wanting they recognize or not is because they two depart. 1 week after that, there is the first week, and another week is the ending. So the first week, they're all talking about, even in the bus, they're all talking about these stories. I find the television documentary program has so huge impact on the society. This phenomenon is quite attractive for me, and especially it's about the ordinary people. It's touched me. It's touched me about my academic nerves. So I transfer my interest into so-called television documentaries at that time. This is my beginning to enter the new documentary movement. So at that time, we need to understand realism means. Realism, I find at first for the first generation of the documentaries, of producer, they just talking about the discussion about the technical ways. So how to carry the cameras, how high is the camera, how the position, how the cynical ways of the sound, the long shot we use of the long shot, how to use this. This is such kind of they think this kind of technical ways is the guarantee of the realism at that time. So beside that, they also talking about other ways, because how to build a relationship with your subject of the cameras of your programs. So at that time, I just mentioned the programs, the life space. The producer told his directors, said, you should treat your subject just like your family members. If your subject feels scared before your cameras, it's not the problem of your subject. It's the problem of you, because they don't feel scared before his wife and husband. So they ask their director to build a close relationship with the subject. It's also a new kind of the connections, a kind of relationship. Just at that time, China also moved from the collective societies. In the old tradition, the major character of television should be the two kinds of people. One is the heroes, the labor models, and the political leaders, such kind of, and ordinary people just applause beside them. So the new documentaries let the ordinary people become the major character of their programs. It's the revolution. It's the revolution for Chinese the television programs at that time, connected with the realistic ways. So this is the first beginning. But after that, when the ordinary people's stories become popular and become complicated ways, because they find, the poor people's stories also can be a commercialized resource, can become explored way for them to meet the market. So at that time, they find the so-called realistic ways. So can be borrowed from another entertainment genres of the television programs. So they find the deeper things is that behind the realism actually is the ideology. It's the value judgment. It's the position of the camera. It's the position of the producer, the standing point of the producer. So from that way, we can find the distinguishing between the first generation and the second generation. So first generation means the first generation means the. Okay, sorry. Okay. The first generation means this first generation, they wish to resistant to the ideology authorities. So because we just transformation from the traditional way to the new period, and we need to resistance a lot of political press. So this kind of pursuit become the shared characters of the first generations. So first generation also take the ways of the social observe ways. So they use the so-called the direct cinema series to to produce their own producer. For example, American famous documentary producer Wiseman, who has been invited to China to give speech to the television documentary producers at that time. And also another the Ogama Xinyu is also quite influential to the first generations, who produced their documentary in the 60s of Japan, and at that time they focused on the social issues. So the observed ways, why they adapted the observed ways, one reason is coincide with the realism, so they can get the legitimacy from the official systems. And another way is the observed ways can give them the position to watch the society from bottom up. So for the first generation, their workers concerned a huge amount of the social issues, which is different from the second generations. So the second generations which appeared during the DV period, when the DV machines and equipment has been adapted by the young generations, so they don't need to build the official or unofficial close relationship to the television station. And at that time, at the end of the 90s, television station began to commercialization. So they don't feel interested about documentary now. So at that time, the young generation used the digital video to express themselves. So they will all emphasize the individualization. So because we have no, they said, I have no social duties. I just wish to express myself. So it's quite interesting. So if you just your own story, why will pay attention to you, right? So because today is the video times, we can find a huge amount of the videos in the website. So at that time, in my opinion, individual means every person in China today can become the census of the Chinese changes. So when they pay attention to their own stories, a lot of young producers wish to tell their own stories, their family stories, their marriage programs. But in my opinion, all these stories all belongs to the great transformations, pains of societies. Because if you have come to China before, you will find how changed dramatically in China today, every year, every month. So everyone's fate has been changed at that time, in today's time. So individual stories get significance in such kind of social context. This is different from the first generation. The first generation says, they wish to say, we are not artists. We're not artists because they wish to give a distinction from the so-called artists. They wish to emphasize this. We just the handcraft. We just handcraft. We just to produce our workers, and these workers let the other people speak, to let the other people's lives to be represented. So it's different ways. It means the ourselves and the others, the relationships, the changes. But in my opinion, even today with its the individualization times, in my opinion, it all belongs to a huge an objective problems of China. So let me explain it. So I just mentioned China is a huge existence, and how to interpret it, its history and the society today is a huge challenge for us, for the intellectual circles, for the ordinary people, even. How can we understand the situation? It's the change of today's. So we all the pre-existence discuss the so-called the modernization or post-modernization theories discuss can't enough to explain the complicated situation of China. You can say China is capitalism or socialism or something mixed together. So it's great challenge for the communist, for the economists, socialists, the journalists. It's great challenge for all of us. But for the documentaries producers, what the presentations may not be suicide for their own opinions, which means what they expressed maybe exceed his own subjective ideas. You will find the conflict or struggle or confront each other with the producer and the reality and the subjective of their films. So I think this is significance, different from the fiction films. Because fiction films are all controlled by the directors. But for the documentary, even if the producer claim this is on my own work, it's very individual, it's stylistic. But if you put it together, you will find they shared a lot of common characteristics. And the quite important phenomenon, in my opinion, is that a lot of producers, not professional producers, we call this the one-work producers. There are a lot of producers, for example, especially the young generation, they just put one documentaries. After that, they disappeared. Just like the wave, the later wave catch the first wave, which means that this representation used the documentary genres to express themselves inside the society itself. This young generation just use them to express themselves. After that, maybe they have no energy, no money, and a lot of things they will give up. But you can find differently. A lot of young generation emerged continually. It's different, a lot of them, and from different fields. Maybe college students from the cinemas, journalism, social studies, or even no relationship to these fields. They maybe use the cameras to express themselves. So this is quite interesting. So I think it's hard to use all the theories to explain them. It's the personal workers, but these personal workers belongs to the objective problem of China. So it's also give the researchers a great challenge, force us to change or discuss, to break the discuss, the self circle, in university of the discuss of self-productive in the academic circles. But this such kind of the phenomenon forces us to break such kind of reproduction, discuss. So I think this is the significance of the new documentary movement today. So this is why I think the individualization need to be seriously today. So this, which means we have the different aesthetic styles between the two phrases. For the first generation, I just mentioned observe and direct films, the style, and for the second generation, they like to be used the so-called self-reflexive ways, the perform ways to do their own works. So the interesting ways, they have no idea about what's the series of the self-reflexive ways or what's the perform ways. Yes, but they just by themselves, by instinctive, they find such kind of ways to express themselves. They break the boundary between the subjective and objective, and they themselves can before the camera and behind the cameras. The camera's position and the relationship can be changed rapidly, flexibly. So this is quite interesting. So they have no idea of the series, but they created the practice ways. This is quite interesting. It's different. Yes, also belongs to different the phase. But the first ways, the observe ways, continuity, even for the young generation, a lot of them also adapt that. So so I also wish to emphasize phenomena about the relationship between the cities and the countryside reflected on the new documentary movement. In China, today, we wish to, is urbanization, the process is continuing. But if we wish to understand what means, we need to understand what the countryside in China means. Because the most important social problems is the migration workers programs in China. In China, we have not serious race programs. Today, we have in state, we have the great ruptions between the poor and the rich, between the countryside and urban, between the inner side of the cultural areas. So if you wish to understand why the countryside, why the Pearl River Delta areas developed, why Shanghai urbanization is quite so successful, you need to understand the contribution of the migration workers from the inner side of the China. So one of the Chinese quite famous director, future director, he also is a documentary director, but his documentary is not good enough for compare with the future director Zhang Ke. And his first film is Xiao Wu. English title is also Xiao Wu. I'm not sure. He find the small town in his films. Why his representative figures in so-called the sixth generations. Sixth generation inside his genius is diverted, but they share the character is that they reflect about the reality of China today. You can find China's reality in the so-called the fifth generations. Because the fifth generations all become quite Hollywoodization. They all eager to build the huge capital investment, the films. So this compare with that, we have the so-called sixth generations. So Jia Dongke is quite interesting. Is he find a small town in the province, hometown, Shanxi province. Shanxi province is the area to produce mine. So if you pay attention to Chinese news, you will find a lot of news about the explosion of mine channel, in China happened recently. So you find why so-called the little town suddenly become very important metaphor of China today, just because the urbanization have a strong thirst of the energy. So such kind of little town become the confront areas for the modernization and the traditional society, in the society and the cultural area societies. So this kind of millions helped Jiazhangke successful. So this is Jiazhangke's millions. So I will show later clips of the documentary. It's called Sanyuan Li. Sanyuan Li is actually area's name. For all the Chinese students, all the Chinese kids all learn this name because we learn these lessons in our historical textbook. This in the late Qing area, in the late Qing period time, this area is the villages resistant to the invasion of the British Army's invasion. Break out here is in Guangdong province, is the cultural areas. And after that time, is during the first period is 鸦片怎么说的？Opium Wars. Now the first Opium Wars happened these areas. Not happened these areas due to this the accident that happened there. But today, Sanyuan Li become the villages inside the cities. It's in Chinese called Chenzhongcun, because this area is just enclosed by the urbanization. So just this is just like an island inside the urban areas, and this area just nearby the Guangzhou railway stations, and Guangzhou railway station is the huge stations for migration workers. So these areas become the peasants also keep their collective the ownership of the land. So they build a lot of crowded buildings to land for the poor people, migration workers. So these areas become a very strong metaphor for Chinese history, and today is content together. We can find the traditional empire compare with confront with the Western's imperialism. And we can find today the inner society confronted with the culture areas, the urban and the countryside. It's all happened here. So it makes sense, in these ways. So in China, you will find a lot of the documentaries concerned about the countryside topics. So this kind of is two different situations. One is they just wish to express the stories of the poor peoples, but different from just like the journalist the report about their poor life, or especially for the young generations, is quite significant. Is that a lot of young generation come to the countryside, come to the faraway areas, especially the ethnic areas, to pay homage to the poor people's dignity. So they're trying to find another way to resist the urbanizations. So for the first generation, they have a strong resist object, that's politics. But for the young generations, they lived in a different era, actually. The pressure of the politics not directly. But what they face is the nihilism. They find the challenge of the meaningless of life in urban areas. So they wish to resist such kind of things. So they come to the countryside, wish to find a spirit to consist the meaningless of today's urban life. So they always named their documentary works as happy life. Happy means, a lot of them use this such a happy means. So what happy means? Happy not means the materials rich for, just means a kind of spirit which exists not in the urban area, but in the countryside, in the ethnic areas. It's in the poor people when they face the difficulty, face the suffer of the society, they express how they express their dignities. So this is quite interesting. So nostalgia is a kind of nostalgia, but this kind of nostalgia how become the resistance against the globalization. So this is quite interesting. So a lot of problems should be the ethics of the camera. So especially for the second generations, just because the digital videos the flexible and available. So a lot of young generations use the camera to themselves, private life, to their parents' life, such kind of things. You will find the boundaries between the public and the private surface is blurred. And it's also a great challenge for us because some kind of documentary focus on the inside little towns in China's inner side province. And these towns have a high rate of jobless. So the citizens there, the people there, they dropped in the meaningless, absurd ways. Absorbed the situation of their lives. For example, one documentary told a story about a little town in Fudan province. The people there, children, old people, they all watch American programs for the young babies. It's called Chinese 天线宝宝. It's called, how to say, I'm not sure Americans there. So for the babies to how what's the sky, what's to learn language, the programs. Why all the citizens in that town all watch these films is because they find the lottery. They think lottery number. They have the illegal lottery activity is quite popular. They think the number will hide in this program. So you will find the phenomena. All these people all watch such kind of programs. So such kind of phenomena happened in China. So you will find the documentary wish to deal with such kind of topics. Why in back? So okay. So I just wish to the last question. I wish to to give to give the scope of the new documentary movement. So I just mentioned the television documentary began from the end of the 80s, from the crucial point of Tiananmen accident. But if we, from the broad the perspective, you will find the end of the 70s quite significant for the Chinese documentary photographies. Because at that time, also Chinese historic moment, it also happened another Tiananmen accident. It's not a student moment at the end of the 80s. And that's a citizen moment at that time. It also happened in Tiananmen Memorial, the premier Zhou Enlai at that time, at the end of the 1970s. So at that time, ordinary Chinese people, what they can access just the cameras. So what they have, just the cameras. They just use the camera to. When they realize it's the historic moment, they wish to record it. So they use the camera to reflect that. So from the end of the 1970s is the beginning of the documentary photograph. And at the end of the 90s is the whole emerge of so-called the sixth generation of filmmakers. So that is quite interesting. I can show you some image. Okay. So it's quite famous documentary photographer Hou Dengke, who is quite influential at the circle of the documentary photographers. But unfortunately, he has passed away several years ago. But he is leading figures in this from the throughout the 80s. You can find his ways. The Shanxi province in China is the inner side province, is the agriculture province. He wished to find the poetic meanings of the traditional ways. He wished to build the relationship between the land, God, people, the heaven, the earth, the people, and the God. Yeah. So this traditional way is a kind of the significance, especially compared with the urbanization in China at that time. So you'll find. Yeah, sorry, why? Okay. Okay, the next page is also about Hou Dengke. You can find the relationship. It's kind of a kind of arrow. It's narrated by the Benjamin's series. It's a kind of arrows of poetries. Yeah, you will find God. Yeah, especially if you compare with this one. Is another photographer is Zhang Xinmin. He spent 10 years in the 80s, moved from the Sichuan province, inner side, the agriculture province, between the Shenzhen, the culture areas, the Guangdong province, to take the pictures to reflect up the immigration, the movement of the peasant. So he has a photograph. Book is beginning the cities. He said when most years we get success to build the national state, just because we use the tragedy from the countryside to the urbanization. But today, another kind of the people come from the countryside, the includes of the urban. So what's the significance? He wished to explore the significance of that. So you can find for the ordinary people, they need to build a new identities. But this new identity is based on the man-made black background. Yeah, especially compared with this one. This one is the poster of the poster of the conference. As from the Mao eras. At that time, the 16th or 17th time, the ordinary peoples build their identities with the political context. The Tiananmen squares, the background, you can find a different identity in different time. So we need to build for everyone of Chinese people need to build. So it's about the industries. Industry, yeah, you can also find some the background. These workers worked in the in my opinion, this is a kind of mistress background. It comes from the deep of the history at that time. Yeah, you can. Yeah, this work comes in us from the deep of the history today. So the history of industry is quite significant in China today. Yeah, it's a big topic. We have you can find the great transformation for the working class to identify themselves. This is the migration workers, the portrait. You can especially compare with this one. This is quite famous. The image is called Wang Jinxi's example of working class in small areas. He's the worker of the oil work. He's the oil workers. If you know how important oil for the industrialization, you mean why he has become the example of the working class. The subjectivities, the building of subjectivities, based on their self-consciousness, you find the confidence in his face, but also based on the light from outside, shaped his face, right? But compare with this, they lost their self-consciousness. This is the portrait of today's worker. It's hard for them. They are class because they lost their consciousness. If they lost their consciousness, it's hard to connect it as a class. This is the situation of today, China. So some of the representative, the workers of the documentary filmmakers is the other bank. Okay, just a quick. Okay. So I just the last mention about this Tiexi district is very important documentary workers, which last for 9 hours actually, but it reflects the history of the industry means for China and even for the world. Okay, let's stop here. Thank you.